Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Andrea Mestrovic from Very Polite Agency. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with me today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure as well.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Did I say your last name correctly?
Mestrovic, you kind of did. I feel like you screwed up a little bit there at the end. But
Mestrovic.
there you go.
Where are you from?
I was born in Dubrovnik, Croatia.
Oh.
The jewel of the Balkans.
The jewel of the Balkans. So I've been to Croatia, just to Zagreb. Nowhere really that exciting.
Honestly, not as exciting as Dubrovnik, but beautiful nonetheless.
That's right. Maybe we can go to Dubrovnik one day.
Yeah.
How'd you end up in Canada?
Was born in Dubrovnik, lived in Sarajevo during the Civil War. I was there for the first 10 months of the war. I often refer to myself as a child of war.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's what made me stronger in life. And we moved to Germany for a few months and then moved to Canada to look for new opportunities with my family.
How old were you?
I was 12.
12.
Yeah.
And here you are.
Yeah, I know. Canada's home.
Excellent.
For sure.
So can you just tell us a little bit about maybe some of your work experience? Like what brands have you worked for? What titles have you had? What's the story?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll start with the fact that I wanted to be a dentist.
Oh.
And I have a degree in biochem and I have a degree in communications, but my parents wanted me to be a doctor or a dentist. And I thought, okay, well, the dentist sounds good.
That's like a classic immigrant parent thing, right?
100%. 100%. Got into dental school to prove a point. Didn't want to take that path. Decided to go into communications and marketing. Got a degree at SFU in communications. And then went into the world of publishing. I started off with a publication called Shared Vision Group. Which was all about sustainability and green living before that was a thing.
Yeah.
So think like 2003.
Yeah.
Spent some time there, learned a lot about publishing, media relations, selling advertising. Now imagine selling advertising for a publication that's in green and sustainability at a time when that was really not a thing. Imagine how persuasive you needed to be. So spent some time there and then went into wine with a company called International Cellars and spent a few years there as their marketing manager. Did a lot of their corporate communications, dealt with the BCLDB. A wonderful experience, learned a lot about wine. And then worked in restaurants, was a director of marketing for the Kanki Group. They owned at that point Joe Forte's, Goldfish, Sandbar, a few other things. Great event marketing experience, a wonderful time there, learned a lot. Went through a sale there, was at the negotiating table when they sold it. When they sold Joe Forte's to the Keg Group. And then went into a very unique position with a company called Oak Bay Marine Group, which was based in Victoria. I was their VP of marketing, and they had a very eclectic portfolio. So there was 24 different brands that we owned, from marinas to restaurants and hotels, resorts, retail spaces. Again, a really sort of diverse group, and a great experience for me. And then from there, I went into pure retail. I went into a company called Kitten Ace. I was their head of global PR. And it was a company that was founded by the founder of Lululemon, Chip Wilson, and his family. And I joined when we were a team of maybe 20 people, and we grew to over 1,000 people in 1.5 years. We launched 62 locations in 5 international markets. I lived basically on an airplane.
I remember you were always like, you were always everywhere. And I remember being at the park with your husband, Tony. Yeah. And like, where's Andrea today? And he's like, I don't know.
Like maybe Australia.
Yeah, who knows
maybe
where
not.
she is.
Honestly, I'm also lucky. I have a very supportive husband who was there for me throughout it. But it was a great, Kitten Ace was probably an equivalent to an MBA. You know, we launched so many different, in so many different markets, the same brand concept, and kept the consistency and the cohesiveness of the brand messaging. And it was an incredible experience. It really was. Yeah.
And once you left Kitten Ace, then you started your own agency?
Not quite. I left Kitten Ace and joined a company called Mark Anthony Group.
Oh, yes.
As their VP of marketing. And they own wineries, they own multiple brands in beverage. They actually came up with Mike's Hard Lemonade.
Oh, wow.
That's their brand. Yeah, and they still own the rights for it in the U.S., but no longer in Canada. They sold it. Anyways, I joined them, and that was also a great experience, mostly because marketing and being a VP of marketing in that industry is very different than being in marketing in retail, in fashion and in retail, because being a marketer in beverage is very much a numbers game. Yep. It's you're dealing with a per case advertising spend, and it's very much it's all about the budget. Yeah. So it's very different and educational in many ways. So it's kind of a nice way to balance your creative experience.
Yeah, excellent. And then you left Mark Anthony to start Very Polite Agency.
Yes.
So are you guys a full stack agency?
We are, yeah. We've decided to start it because we all came from Kit and Ace. That's where we met. Mm-hmm. So there's 4 partners, and we led a team of 60 on the brand team. At one point. There were 60 of us.
Wow.
We come from sort of very different sides of the creative realm, but we operate well together. So we have Dylan, who leads our creative team, Alan, who leads our production and photography teams, JJ, who's a bit of a jack of all trades, but really does strategy. And then myself, I'm more communications and PR. Yeah. Although sometimes legal and accounting.
Yeah, or anything.
Or anything
HR
else,
and the whole deal.
Moving boxes. I do all of it. But anyways, we decided to start the agency because we wanted to work in different verticals, really. Like we loved, technical apparel and fashion and retail, but we also loved technology, and we loved finance, and we loved real estate. Yeah. And we wanted to sort of have an opportunity to work with clients in all these different realms. Yeah. And we were fortunate enough that pretty much as soon as we started, we were able to get clients that are in these different verticals. Right. And I'm happy to say that 3.5 years later, we work in tech, we work in finance, we work in development, and so on and so forth.
So what kind of brands what brands do you work with that we would know?
Well, Hootsuite, you probably know. We did their rebrand, which actually launched recently, which we're really excited about because it was a year-long process. Yeah, great. Probably one of our most involved projects to date. We work with Westbank, which is a local developer. I say local because they're based here, but they have projects in Tokyo, in Seattle, in San Jose. And obviously in Vancouver. We work and we actually work with multiple developers in Vancouver. We think that Vancouver is such an amazing market when it comes to real estate. So there's a lot of creativity that is born here. So we sort of love jumping in and being a part of that. We're still in fashion and technical apparel. So think Mavi Denim. We shoot all of their campaigns and their e-com. Spence Diamonds, for example, we're Cavalier, we love the jewels. Who doesn't love the jewels, right? We also work with the Fairmont Group. We work with the Fairmont Pack Rim quite a bit. We've done their social media direction. We shoot for them 4 times a year. So it's a really sort of diverse and eclectic portfolio. Yeah. That's that touches on all sorts of industries. Yeah.
And you also work for Chip Wilson.
Yes. Chip is one of our clients and, loved by all.
Okay, so let's talk about PR. So, sure. I mean, we're in a turbulent world right now. I mean, we're kind of always in a turbulent world. There's always a thing that brands are either fighting against or fighting for or something like that. And messaging ultimately is super important. So how, when you have a client asking you, how do we approach this issue? How do we communicate this message? What is the thought process that goes through your head to help them have a clear, meaningful direction?
I mean, I'll say the most obvious thing to say is it depends on the client, obviously, right? For me, I always approach it from a place of authenticity. I think it's important to understand that PR is not just about shaping the message. It's about the message. And I say that to clients over and over again. And it's about sort of understanding what their goals and intentions are, understanding the history of the brand, and understanding what it is that they stand for and vocalizing that if appropriate.
So if there's a current hot issue in society and it really has nothing to do with the brand. Are you suggesting they talk about it, or you're kind of suggesting if it's not kind of within your values or if it's not within kind of your wheelhouse, stay out of it?
I think my suggestion as a general sort of suggestion would be that unless you can bring value to a topic and a discussion, don't just speak to speak.
Yeah.
That is not to say that, I've had clients during the pandemic that were questioning whether they need to continue to engage with their audience, being that everybody's facing a health crisis. And I said, yes, you have to continue to engage with your audience as long as you have something to say.
Yeah.
So if you have a new product launch, or if you have a new book that you're launching, or you have something to add, if you have value to add to their lives, and if it's information that's valuable to your customer base, then by all means, it's important to continue the dialogue. If you're just saying things to say them, then maybe just don't.
So don't talk for the sake of talking.
Just don't talk for the sake of talking, and be authentic. I mean, I know it sounds very obvious, but my whole profession is based on shaping the message and saying things in the right way and saying the right things at the right time. And be that as it may, it's equally important to be authentic to who you are and what you stand for.
Right.
Because especially in today's day and age, where it's a pretty quick search and you can find out all the skeletons that might exist. So you better be authentic and real to what you are and what you stand for.
Yeah. So when shaping the message, if I come to you as a brand and I'm like, we need help, product launch has gone bad, people are saying bad stuff about us, help us get in front of this. Like, what is the actual process you go through within your agency to develop a strategy for a brand that might be struggling?
Well, the first thing that we would do is a bit of a brand download. So I wouldn't say that that's a brand discovery session, but it's definitely a download where we get to get a bit more context as to what the company has gone through over the last however many years.
Yeah.
But really the reason why we do that is because it sets us up for success to do a crisis audit.
Okay.
And that's really where we go in and discuss things that aren't always comfortable. And we discuss it with either the owner, the founder, the CEO, kind of the shareholders that are the most important.
Like what kind of uncomfortable things are you talking about? Can you give us some examples?
It could be anything from if it's a publicly traded company, is there a proxy fight that we should know of? Are there lawsuits that we should know about?
Yeah.
Is there ownership that we're not aware of? Or all the things that are internal and not necessarily, especially if it's a private company, that the public wouldn't know, but that could come out at some point.
How personal would you get in that conversation? Like with the personal life of the CEO? Like, have you been cheating on your wife? Have you been...
We would. Yeah, we would. Because I think when you sign on and decide to engage with somebody from a PR standpoint who's doing a crisis audit, you absolutely have to be transparent about all the things, especially if it's...
You guys are hardcore.
I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to be written down anywhere or messaged in any way. It just means that we need to know what might come out. What are you dealing with here? And we need to be prepared for it. It's essential that we know everything. It's kind of like when you're talking to your lawyer. In fact, we often work with the legal teams on behalf of our clients to ensure that we're in check with everything else, but we also are working collaboratively on all these topics.
So then after the crisis audit, what's the next thing that you guys will do?
The next thing is a strategy. So it really depends. Is it a proactive strategy where we're going after press and deciding to place a certain story with a certain person in a certain publication, or if it's the type of situation where we are ready to react if we need to, which means developing holding statements and such so that we're ready.
What's a holding statement?
A holding statement is a statement that you would release upon a crisis. So something happens to your company or your brand, and you release a holding statement to buy you time to come up with the rest of the messaging.
Yeah.
So what we try to do is anticipate what might come up.
Yeah.
And then develop holding statements so that we can release them when this comes up. And then we buy ourselves some time to assess the situation and so on and so forth.
How much of your success in engaging with kind of mass media, news, newspaper, whatever it is the relationships you have with journalists versus your ability to get in touch with somebody that you've maybe never met before?
I would say that it continues to be the relationship that you have with the journalist. And I think that although the world is changing and, people are changing jobs and switching around, I think it's in PR, it's a relatively traditional industry. So it's still really based on rapport, relationships. What have I done for you lately so that you would return the favor to me and hear me out when I need to be heard?
Yeah.
So it's incredibly important that you have the right contacts and the right relationships within the right publications.
So if someone's wanting to get into PR, how does one start, or how did you start building that? We would say Rolodex, but I don't know that that's a relevant word anymore.
I mean, it is, to be honest. That's essentially what it is. I have like a list of press, in all these different countries that I keep in touch with and continue to sort of nurture the relationship. How do you get started? I can tell you how I got started. Yeah. While I had my very first job, which, like I said, was with Shared Vision magazine, I decided to put on an event. And it was a charity event. It was for BC Cancer Agency for breast cancer, and it was at Opus Hotel. Mm-hmm. And I put on the event for two reasons. One, my aunt passed away from breast cancer, so I wanted to raise money and donate to the research. And two, I wanted to find a way to get contacts and meet people through putting on this event. And that's precisely what ended up happening. Is I actually put on a fashion show with 7 local designers. I had Fashion Mag as a media sponsor, Global TV as a media sponsor. I did it at Opus Hotel, so they were quite thrilled to have us there. It was sort of a community initiative that what ended up happening for me in the end, it yielded numerous contacts and positioned me in a way in great light. Yeah. People were curious who I was, where I'm coming from. Do I have a company backing me up? In fact, it's one of the reasons why I actually started a company at that point that was called Style Dome Consulting, and it was just PR. Yeah. But it was because of that event that I started the company. I had all these people coming to me and asking me for help, and all I did was put on an event.
How old were you?
I was 23.
Wow. So you launched straight in.
I did.
Like fresh out of college, you're just ready to go.
I had my first job, and I put on this event, and then I incorporated a company, and I had an office in London, UK, and here, because I landed a client out of Milan. I mean, it's kind of a convoluted story, but yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, to go back to your question, you have to kind of roll up your sleeves and you have to hustle to meet people and give them your time, and for them to give you their time, there needs to be something meaningful. Right. And for me, it was this charity event that for me meant a lot, and people could really read that it meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And they gave me time.
So tell me about the hustle. Like you've worked for a lot of companies. You've started a couple of your own. And so you've obviously learned, you're like child of war, comes to Canada as a 12-year-old, and then figures out how to hustle hard, obviously. How much of that started in high school? Or maybe before that, when you're like, I don't know, do you have side jobs? You're always doing something, like you're selling lemonade, in the middle of a war? Like, what's going on?
I mean, great question. No, I wasn't, to be honest. I think that when I moved here, I learned about the opportunity to be able to work when you're a teenager. Back home, you don't really work when you're a teenager. You work when you're done university.
Okay.
So it's a cultural difference, and I came here, my parents were immigrants. Obviously we lost everything we had back home. We were well off, and then we came here with nothing. And I was excited about the prospect of being able to work and make money and buy myself cool clothes that my parents couldn't afford. So as soon as I could, I started to work in retail, because that was kind of the thing to do, is apply for a job at Guess or Foot Locker or wherever. And that's what I did. And I think that, and I think that was incredible. I mean, I sold shoes, I sold clothes, I sold groceries. I mean, it was sometimes a hustle, sometimes it was fun. But the bottom line is I made money and I bought myself things I wanted.
Right.
And that independence was I think crucial to sort of continuing to sort of inspire me to like work harder and do more and make more and do bigger things.
Yeah.
So it actually started here.
Yeah.
It didn't start back home.
Right.
Like I said, back home we're relatively shielded.
Right.
We're provided for until we're done university, and then you're off doing your thing.
Yeah.
And then, you know, back home, it's such a difference in cultures, really, because back home you're provided for. You start working. You have children. Your parents take care of your kids while you work, and then when your parents get older, you take care of your parents.
Right.
Here, a little bit different.
Yeah.
You know, you're kind of like off on your own as soon as possible, and you're hustling and working hard.
Yeah.
And your parents are fine on their own, and if anything, they help you along the way.
Yeah.
And there isn't this expectation that you need to take care of your parents when they get older.
We just send them to an old folks home.
I mean, yeah, some,
Get out of here,
some
Grandma.
do. Some do, I guess. I don't know. So it's just different, you know?
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. Okay, so you've been working with Chip Wilson for, you know, a fair amount of time.
Yeah, a long time now.
Now, he's a fairly divisive figure, a controversial figure, and an extremely successful figure. So how do you manage someone who, I mean, he often says, from my perspective, he often says what he wants to say, and you're his PR manager. You're supposed to, you know, kind of deal with how he says. Supposed to manage him at some level.
Best of luck.
How do you deal with a guy like that?
My favorite was, you know, when I first started working for Chip, I had a goal of being quoted by the New York Times by whatever the date was.
Yeah.
And that happened. And I was quoted, but I was quoted in an interview with Chip. And I think I was like scolding him or something. And that was my quote. And I thought, oh my God, this is not what I wanted.
That's not what you were hoping
This
for.
is not at all what I wanted. Chip. I mean, I got to know Chip while I was at Kit and Ace. I worked directly with him from the beginning, but he was slightly removed from Kit and Ace for the first, I would say, probably a year or so.
Yeah.
He had other things to focus on, and I worked very closely with his wife Shannon and his son JJ, who I continue to work with. Chip he's a brilliant man, in my personal opinion. He is obviously extremely successful, aspirational in many ways. Chip is also very, very transparent, unfiltered. Sometimes what he says is not understood by all, at least not in the way in which he means it, which makes it an interesting challenge and an opportunity for someone who's in PR to manage him. He also does not like to be managed.
Right.
So it's really been a bit of a journey of trust, learnings. I think we're at a stage now where he does listen to what I say. And
How long did that take?
About 7 years or so. Yeah. I feel like we're at a place where he listens, he nods, and sometimes he'll do exactly what I say, and then sometimes he'll throw me a curveball.
Yeah.
But I think he's, honestly, if you're in PR, he's the ideal client.
Why is that?
If you are up for a challenge, and if you're gutsy and you are able to take the heat, which I most definitely have taken the heat, because being Chip Wilson's PR director, you know, you definitely will get some heat from what he says.
Yeah.
If you're up for the challenge, and if you can stand by the strategies that you've put in place, what an amazing experience to be able to do that, to be able to sort of craft statements that say what he wants to say in a way that the world will understand it, and not necessarily take it a different way.
So can you tell us any stories, like any projects you worked on with him that were a little bit controversial, or that stand out in your mind as like, wow, that was a bit of a risky move, but, you know, it ended up working?
I mean, everything I have done with Chip is a risky move, so there's really not one particular thing. I mean, if you think about it, the family started Kit and Ace while he was still somewhat involved with Lululemon, so there was a lot of conversation there regarding, okay, how involved is he? What type of a proprietary fabrication are we talking about?
Right.
Who does this belong to? So then we go through this incredible journey with Kit and Ace and launch all these stores, and then we downscale because we went and exploded and imploded. And then he decides to write a book. And I mean, he's still the majority shareholder at Lululemon. He writes a book that's really a memoir, biography, an autobiography, but also reveals a lot of the company's secrets, you know. So you automatically you're kind of in a spotlight there and at ready to take any type of criticism. And then, of course, you know, the comments that Chip has made over the years on many things just stay with him. People don't seem to forget them. No matter how many times we address them, dismiss them, explain them, people seem to hold on to them. So it's really, there really isn't sort of one particular project or place. I mean, the fact that the man wrote a book, released the book in a record time of 3 months. We published the book, designed the book, named the book, incorporated a company that would publish it, then spent $4 million promoting the book. I mean, nobody has done that in the history. Like I've dealt with lawyers in New York as well as publishers in New York who have specifically told me, nobody has done this in the world of publishing. Nobody has invested this much. Nobody has done this in this time frame. You're breaking numerous records, and that's just who he is. That's just how. When you have a certain drive and a certain mentality, which he, you know, if he was here today, he would probably talk to you about Landmark and all this personal development that he has done, and that he accredits a lot of what he is today and what he has become to those programs. But when you have that drive and you have that personality that he has now, it's the world. You don't have any boundaries. You could just go on and do whatever you want if you feel like it's the appropriate thing to do.
That's amazing. So when you're working with someone like Chip Wilson, who's got a pretty strong reputation, or brands that have a really strong brand and a reputation that that when we think of a brand, we think of it in a certain way, and maybe that brand's now in trouble, and you need to shift that message. How difficult is it to get people to think of a brand differently? Because you said, like, the skeletons follow Chip wherever he goes. You know,
and all of us. Is
it possible to get consumers to think differently about a brand, maybe because they've done something bad? And now we're going to try to shift the message.
I think those first impressions are the most expensive ones to change. It's sort of a long road to change perceptions. It's an expensive one as well. I think that brands that have a certain foundation that continues to be the reason for being are the ones that make it. I think those that don't have that will not make it in today's circumstances. So I don't think it's impossible to change perceptions, and I don't think it's impossible to sort of re-educate your tribe. But I think starting a new business or starting a new brand or concept, it's incredibly important to put in the money and the work into who you're for, what you stand for, what your values are, your mission, your vision. Why are you different? Who are you for exactly? And really sort of determining and zooming in on that imaginary muse that really should be your guiding light to everything you do for your brand. So is it possible to go back and re-educate and realign? 100%. I mean, like people, brands make mistakes, you know. And I think, and you'll see, especially like I said, in today's circumstances, you'll see a lot of brands making mistakes and speaking up about those mistakes, which I think is the right thing to do. But I think it's possible to do and probably garner new press and probably get a new following in addition to your current tribe. But I think it is expensive, and I think it's much easier if you have a foundation that is truthful to your brand and that continues to be valid.
Yeah, excellent. That's great. Let me ask you one last question. If you're 20 years old right now and you're sitting in a marketing class, what do you wish that you knew? Like, what do you know now that you're like, man, I wish that someone told me that?
Yeah.
What advice can you give?
I mean, I think about this a lot, this question. I think about it because I have 2 daughters, and I think about what I would say to them if they said to me, I want to go into marketing.
Yeah.
Like, where do I begin? What do I do? And I think I've been very fortunate. I worked hard, but I've been also very fortunate with what came my way. The learnings that I've had, the exposure that I've had. I've also worked pretty much in all of my jobs. I worked directly with the CEOs, which really, really changes your perspective.
Yeah.
Because often you start in marketing and you're so focused on creativity and communications that you sort of lose track of the bottom line.
Right.
And you lose track of, I'm here for a reason.
Right.
I'm here to do a job that's going to ensure that this product sells.
Right.
And my boss will only really be happy if this product sells
Right.
and we succeed on to the next phase, whatever that is. And I think that often, especially if you're in creative agencies, you sort of lose track of that. And I've worked in creative agencies as well early on in my career, which is a nice balance to be on the client side and to be on the agency side. And when I'm asked this question, I often say it's really good to start on the agency side. Because you're really sort of doing everything that no one else wants to do.
Yeah.
You're starting at the bottom and you're doing all the things, like whether that's putting proposals together, doing the research, all the minutia that really like directors don't want to do. They put you on it, but it's an opportunity to learn how to do it. And then when you are leading a team, you know what's requested and required of that team.
Right.
So I think that's an important one. Work for an agency, work for a big agency, so that you start at the bottom and you understand the process. Would I necessarily push my kids to go into marketing? Maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not. People think of marketing and PR as this like glamorous world,
right.
And much like any profession, it's not glamorous. There's little portions of it where you're attending an event and you're a part of something amazing and creative, and it's fun and it's great if you're doing a launch. But a lot of it is just hard work, much like everything else.
Yeah.
And particularly PR is a very stressful profession because if you are dealing with clients who are relatively large, you're going to have crisis.
Yeah.
And you better be okay with dealing with press in that type of scenario.
Right.
So it's not cruising at any point
Yeah.
in my career has it been cruising.
Yeah. That's fabulous.
Don't coast. That would be my thing. Just don't coast.
In summary, don't coast.
Don't coast.
Or become a dentist like your parents wanted you to.
I know. See, that's the thing.
I mean, you could always go back to dental school.
Or you could go and be a dentist, but I don't know. Not necessarily for me. If you have like a little bit of creative in you, like maybe don't go into dentistry.
I mean, all you do is make dentures. I mean, how exciting would that be? Thanks so much for your time today, Andrea.
It's so fun.
It's
Thanks
been
for
great.
having me.
Thank you.
Okay.